We had two tables were violating rules right and left. So let's go over this a little bit. I just want to know, like, how many of you are excited to study Revelation? How many of you are a little bit, I don't know, I'm a little bit anxious? How many of you are just like, I don't know, I'm just curious. I have really no idea what I'm really getting into. Okay. So I started this out. I was like, yeah, I wanted to teach Revelation for a long time, and then I started getting ready, and then I moved into the phase of like, why did we do this? And now I'm back to the, oh yeah, this will be fine. So if you're anxious, don't worry, it'll be fine. We'll get there. So let's real quick go through the trivia. What is the one best source for learning to understand the book of Revelation? Old Testament. Absolutely. How many verses are there in Revelation? 404. 404. What is the most significant number in the book of Revelation? 7. You are going to be so tired of 7 by the time we get done. The whole book is built around sevens. How many times does the book of Revelation quote or allude to the Old Testament?
More than 500.
It's over 500. Think about this. It's 404 verses, and there's over it's not just like 501. People are debating, is it over 500? Is it like 675? It's like there are allusions everywhere to the Old Testament. So you're going to be spending a lot of time looking in the Old Testament. Okay, which things that we encountered in the book of Zechariah in the fall will we now meet in Revelation? Lampstand. Yeah, B through G. The only thing is we'll meet lampstand, olive trees, horns, horses, temples, plague. The only thing we won't meet is the woman in the basket. But by the time we meet a certain woman in Revelation, you might sit there and go, I wonder if that's the woman in the basket, only she's not in a basket. All right. Number 6, which of these things is not discussed in Revelation? The exterminator. There will be locusts, and there will be no exterminator. We wish there would be. All right, the book of Revelation is classified as what? It's all the above. Epistle, prophecy, and apocalypse. You see, if you were just a little bit anxious, there's a reason, because it's like, what is this book? It is all sorts of things. And then my favorite question, how many times does the word Antichrist appear in Revelation? 0. Never. How many already know something about Revelation they didn't know before? See? So we're gonna have fun together. Now, if you've been with us for a while, you know kind of how your notebook is put together. We're doing everything. Your book is part 1 of Revelation, and I will give you part 2 later when I'm done with it. In the front of your book, there's some nice color pages, and one of them is a box chart that says this is the pathway for understanding the Bible. And you can look at it later, that's fine. But the point is, when we read the Bible, a lot of times we read something, we read the verse, and then we go, oh, this is what it means, and now I'm going to apply it to my life. And we get into all sorts of trouble when we do that. So, for example, when I was in college, I was in a Christian group, and one of the verses that was very important to this Christian group was Revelation 3:20. Anybody know Revelation 3:20? Yeah. Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me. Now, if we were doing this thing of I just read this verse, and I immediately say, well, okay, that's it, and I can apply it. How could we misread this verse? Jesus is standing at the door and knocking, waiting for me to open the door, and then he'll come in. Is that? Yeah, poor Jesus. He's been knocking at the door for like 3 weeks, waiting for me to open the door. And he can't come in. He's powerless. It all relies on me. It's all up to me. Right? Or you could go, what Jesus really cares about is eating a meal with me. Right? How have you heard this verse apply? Barb.
So at my mother-in-law's funeral, the pastor used this very verse, and people got upset because they were saying that my mother-in-law didn't open the door to Jesus.
Didn't
Open the door for Jesus. So
what do they mean by that?
it means that she was not going to spend eternity with God. That's what they meant.
Okay, so zoomies, Barb is talking about using this verse to refer to if you open the door to Jesus, then you're saved. Like this is the proverbial ask Jesus into your heart, whatever that means. That phrase that's not in the Bible. And so that's how I grew up learning. This was the verse that says you have to open the door, let Jesus into your heart, and then you're saved. But when we get to Revelation 3, you're going to look at it and go, it doesn't mean any of those things. So we're going to follow a path that's a little bit different. Instead of just reading it, we're actually going to, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say, what did it mean to the original readers of John's letter? And that's why it's so important that we keep going back to the Old Testament. Because John's readers, their Bible was the Old Testament. And so we're going to read stuff in Revelation that we're going to go, what? And John's readers would have said, oh yeah, there's that thing again, that passage. So we'll be going back to that a lot. And then once we do that, once we understand how they understood it, then we're going to go over and go, well, what does this have to do with the gospel? Because the gospel is the center of the whole Bible, right? The Old Testament is all pointing to him, and then the New Testament is all explaining and applying the gospel. And then once we understand that, then we're ready to start applying it. So that's how we're gonna do this. Now, there's another thing I want to talk about briefly, and we were talking about it at this table, I think, or maybe this. Oh, it was this table. And the phrase I have is your framework. And the idea of a framework is you come to the Bible knowing how you think things are. And when you read the Bible, because you know how things are, you read a verse and you go, that's what that means. It's like if I was always taught that Revelation 3:20 was about, if I was taught that Revelation 3:20 was about asking Jesus into my heart, then I would read it and go like, there you go, it's about asking Jesus into my heart. And Revelation, it has so many opportunities to do that. Because some of you, well, I was raised on Hal Lindsey's late great Planet Earth. Okay? So I know exactly what was going to happen when, and it all fell apart because Hal said Jesus was going to come back in 1988. And then he didn't. But until then, I would have looked at everything and I would have said, well, Hal teaches this, so that's what this must mean, right? And so all of us probably, if you've ever read Revelation or heard any teaching, all of us come with a framework of this is what I think it means. And so we're all going to have to intentionally set that aside and go, now we're going to go back to the Old Testament and see what it was talking about. And then we can say, is what I've always heard, is that right or is it not right? So we'll work on that. The key thing, what we always say, is a passage can never mean what it didn't mean to the original audience, right? John wrote the book of Revelation to his churches with a specific message, so it must not mean an entirely different thing by the time it gets to us. So, and in fact, I stuck a quote in the front of this book, which you can look at later. And look, it says, the book of Revelation is not a prophecy chart about the future, but it is a call to be a disciple of Jesus. John tells us to be faithful and fruitful, and we should not give in to despair, for in the end, all will end well. That's Revelation. So if you have your prophecy chart at home and you're like, I'm all set, I'm going to bring this in 3 weeks. Maybe think twice about it. And by the time we get to the end, we may want to talk through those things, but with a little bit more knowledge insight to be able to say, okay, what makes sense now and what maybe doesn't. So, so that's that. So you're going to find out that we're going to be going through a process. We're going to observe the text, and then we're going to interpret the text, and then we're going to apply it. And in a large part for us this time, and we always, to interpret it, we say, well, it's because this was written in a different time and different people. But ladies, this is apocalyptic literature, and it is wild. The first few weeks is going to be normal, and then the wheels are going to come off, and we're going to have dragons and beasts and all sorts of strange things happening. And so it's just going to be strange. And so we need to learn how to read this, because to the people that John was writing to, apocalyptic literature was a normal style of writing. And so they didn't freak out when they read this. They went, oh, okay, sure, it's another dragon. I get it. I know exactly what it means. So we're going to have to just back up and interpret that and learn how to do that. One of the tools we're going to use to interpret, we call it context. And there's a bunch of different kinds of context. There will be literary context, like the words around the text. So during the week, we may ask you to go read these other verses in Revelation. There's biblical context. A lot of times John will be pointing back to the Old Testament, and we'll send you back there to look at that. And then there's also the world around the text, like what was it like for Christians living in the Roman Empire, which I'm confident was, in some ways, was very different than it's like, in Bucks County in the year 2026. And then there's the cultural context. How did people think? What did they know that we don't know? Like, what assumptions would they make? So we're going to have to spend some time on that. Let's see. Oh, I did want to tell you one other thing. I've been kind of talking a little bit about the homework and what we'll ask you to do. If you're new, here's the scoop with homework. We call it time in the Word. Homework, whatever. The deal is, don't get hung up on the homework, okay? Homework is there to help you. It is not a quiz to see what you got right, okay? So you do what you can. If you have never read the Bible before, and you're like, next week we're going to do Revelation 1. And if you're like, I read Revelation 1, I have never done that before. You pat yourself on the back and you go, I did great. I made progress, okay? And next week we will cheer you on and go, you read Revelation 1, that's awesome. We won't look at you and go like, you didn't do all 5 days of your homework. We're not like that, okay? Everybody does what they can. The homework has optional parts in it for the people who really like to do extra credit. But you just do what you can. Now, but one thing that's important, this time we have, and you'll have it this week, where I'll ask you to draw what you see. Draw the vision that John is seeing. And immediately, if you're like me, you're like, I'm not drawing. I'm terrible at drawing. Right? And then that's the first reaction. And the second reaction is, Twyla Hero. She can draw it. She should draw it for all of us. Right? We could have Twyla up here, and while we're teaching the lesson, Twyla will be drawing it for us. But here's the deal. The purpose of these drawings is to help you understand what you're reading and what it looks like. What are all the different parts, and how do they go together? So we're going to have a picture of Jesus amongst the lampstands, and then it describes what Jesus looks like. And here's what my picture looks like. I'll just tell you right now. It literally is a stick figure. And it has an oval for his head. And then he has hair. So I put curly hair all around, and his hair is white. So I put an arrow, and I wrote white hair. Okay? So if you're not artistic, you do that, and you go, and you feel really good about yourself, because you got everything that was in this vision. There's more than white hair, but so you do that, and it will help you understand the vision, and it will help you understand, is what John is seeing, is it literal or is it figurative? And I promise you, as you're drawing the lesson this week, you might go, this could still be literal. This could still be literal. And at one point, you're going to go, I'm not sure this is literal. So you see when you find that part. So that's kind of how the homework does. So we always say this, that if you find things you don't understand during the week, you're normal. And in Revelation, ha ha ha, you will find things you don't understand. I have been tearing my hair out. I have like 30% more gray hairs than I used to when I started this. So when you run into stuff and you're like, what is this? Just go, that's fine, it's Revelation, okay? And just know, as always our answer here is we are always just taking one step forward every week. And as long as you can come out of this study going, I may not know everything about Revelation, but I know more than I did, then that's a success, okay? All right. You each have had a handout. It looks like this. It's got a lot of white on it. Okay? So we're going to get oriented to the book of Revelation right now. And let me tell you, I'm going to tell you right up front, especially if you're new, I send out summary notes every week. So tonight, as we're going through this introduction, if you love taking notes, you take those notes, okay? If you don't like taking notes, put your feet up, kick back, listen, it'll be fine. And I'll send you notes. And so it'll be good no matter what. All right. But I gave you lots of white paper in case you wanted to do that. So the first question I'll ask, and you should know this, well, I'll hold that. First question I want to ask is, what is a genre of literature and why do we care? Oh, you English students. It's a writing style. And why do we care to know what genre something is? Right, each genre is read differently. So if you know the genre you're dealing with, you know what to look for. You know what to expect. You know that if there's an entire genre of Hallmark movies, right? You know, if we're going to watch a Hallmark movie, we know it's going to have a guy, a girl, a romance, something's going to happen in the middle. At the end, they're going to get married, right? That's the Hallmark movie genre. So if you're going to read science fiction, you know that's going to be very different than a Hallmark movie, right? So Revelation, we already had that in our trivia thing, is a mix of 3 different genres. Already, Revelation is just a little bit exciting, isn't it? So what are the 3 different genres we said? Prophecy. Let's camp on prophecy for a second. And we would say that because this week you're going to get into your 3rd verse, and it says, "Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy." So, anybody remember from Zechariah what is the role of a prophet? What is he trying to accomplish with his prophecy? It's God's message, but what is his message about? It's about the future, but why does he care about the future? Yeah.
It's a warning to the people to what to expect, and then to help them see that there is hope too.
Okay, so the prophet is dealing with a situation, and he is, whatever situation they're dealing with, he is calling them to be faithful. And he speaks to the future because he's like, if you continue to not be faithful, this is what's going to happen. But he also may encourage them to say, if you are faithful, this is what will happen. And so we want, as we read Revelation, you're going to run right into this, maybe this week, definitely the following week, where John is calling people to be faithful. And so we always want to be on the lookout as we're reading Revelation. How are we being called to be faithful? Isn't that cool? Even as we're reading about dragons and beasts and everything else, we're going to be like, how does this call us to be faithful? Or how does this encourage us, right? In the midst of the wheels coming off the wagon of the earth, how are we being encouraged to be faithful? Okay, so it's part prophecy. And then what else is it? It's an epistle. In verse 4, it'll say, John to the 7 churches that are in Asia. That's the beginning of our letter. And so Revelation shares all the normal parts of an epistle. It has the beginning where it says who it's from, who it's to, it has a grace and peace wish, and then we go into the body of the letter, and then it has a closing of the letter. So there you go, it's a letter. And then, of course, the third genre is apocalypse. Now, apocalypse, some of you women who are reading Blessing, what does apocalypse mean?
Pulling
Not
back
quite.
the curtain.
Huh? Yes, it is unveiling. It comes from a word which, that's why we call it revelation. It comes from a word that means it is revealing. And so it is, think of it as God is pulling back the curtain to let us see how things appear from heaven's viewpoint, okay? And so it is going to be showing us this transcendent reality that we can't see right now. And typically in apocalyptic literature, it gets, this revelation gets mediated by some other being, like an angel. In Zechariah, we always had the angel, and Zechariah would ask him a question, and the angel would answer it. And if Zechariah didn't answer if Zechariah didn't ask the right question, then the angel would go like, so Zechariah, do you want to know about this? And he was working to make sure Zechariah understood. And so this apocalypse, this unveiling, is going to take place in 2 levels. One is time. So it's going to take us from now till the end of the age, until Christ comes back. And the other thing is space. It is going to, we work on this earthly plane and we see things, but the apocalypse is going to reveal the supernatural world that we can't see. And so that's why, to explain all that, we're going to see all these strange visions and ghastly figures. And so I was trying to figure out a good fantasy movie to liken it to, and I found out I don't watch a whole lot of fantasy movies. So I searched on the internet for movies, and I'm like, I think I'd have to watch this one first to see. Anyway, but there is going to be lots of symbolic imagery and metaphors. Now, when you were a kid, if somebody asked you, you went to Sunday school and you get home and somebody says, what was your Sunday school lesson about? And you would always say, Jesus. In apocalyptic literature, periodically I'm going to ask you, is this literal or figurative? And the answer is almost always going to be figurative. Okay, so you're going to read stuff that looks really bizarre, and you just need to stop and go, whoa, 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 that's probably not literal. Okay, and we're going to have we're going to see all these things at the end of the world, and we're going to meet the end of the world, I didn't count it, easily 15 times in Revelation, easily. So anyway, now, if you're like, I don't know if I want to read apocalyptic literature, we already read it in Zechariah. That's why we did Zechariah last time. And you live to tell the tale. So Revelation, easy. If you were with us in Daniel, we did apocalyptic literature. If you were with us in Matthew chapter 24, apocalyptic. If you were with us in Mark chapter 13, apocalyptic. So you can read Revelation. It's just a little bit more, it's like, it's like another level up, but you can definitely do it. So, and just remember the 2 main purposes of apocalyptic is to encourage and comfort believers. And the other thing then is it wants to challenge us to think a different way, to have a new perspective on reality. So, and that's the thing that I think I look forward to most. There's one thing about comfort, and we kind of know at the end of Revelation, like, God wins. That's great. But to get me to think a whole new way while I'm waiting for God to win, I think that's going to be cool. So, so that's the thing. As we read through Revelation, we're constantly going to be asking, how does this cause me to see the world differently? And then how would I live differently in light of that? Text type. Did I put this on your sheet? What's the text type?
Yes.
Don't
All right.
text type.
Anybody remember the 3 kinds of text type we run into in Bible study?
Discourse.
Was that discourse? Discourse is like an epistle, one person doing all the talking, okay?
Narrative.
Narrative is like a story. And poetry. We learned in Zechariah that most of us don't like poetry, but that's all right. So most of this is going to be narrative, and it might be a little bit of narrative discourse with one person telling the story. But when we have a story, what kinds of things do we want to pay attention to? Is that
Plot.
the plot? What else? When you start reading a fiction book, not that this is fiction, but when you start reading a fiction book, what's the first thing you have to kind of get set? Characters, who they are, and oh, the characters in this one are going to be, they're going to be fun. You're going to have some fun with that. Right. Scene changes, whatever. So we're going to pay attention to that. So, all right, let's really get going here on Revelation now. Who is the author? John. And which John? What? Yeah, the Apostle John. There are a few different Johns. It could have been, but the early church fathers, even the ones who knew the apostles, they were the ones. Virtually all of them said this is the Apostle John that wrote this. So this was the John that knew Jesus. He was one of his disciples. Anybody know what else John wrote?
1 John, 2 John.
1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and the Gospel of John. So we may see a lot of the same themes in the Gospel of John. We may see them show up in Revelation. Now, when would John have been writing? It had to be pretty early because John's still alive. Should I just tell you? Okay, here's what we're going to say. It was written around 95 AD. People used to think it was written earlier, but as they've gone on, it's like everybody has aligned 95 AD. And what's happened at this point, the temple, the Jewish temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. So the temple is gone. And life in the Roman Empire was it had its own culture. Rome was a very materialistic culture, very into wealth. It was a very immoral culture. And all the Roman Empire was spread all over the Mediterranean, all around it. And so all these distant states, they would partner with the city of Rome so they could be more wealthy. And then religiously, what would we expect Rome to be like? Pagan, yeah. They worship lots of different gods. They have Zeus, Artemis, a whole bunch of them. Who else did the Romans worship? Anybody know? No? Yes, Caesar. They worship the emperor. And so there's this cult of emperor worship, and Jesus is Lord? Caesar is Lord. Okay? And so the worship of gods, that immorality was part of the worship of the gods. And there was no separation of church and state whatsoever. So all of society was built around this polytheism and worshiping the emperor. And all your coins all were devoted to different gods. If you were a tradesman, you had to belong to a guild in order to work. And each guild was dedicated to a different god. So as a Christian, think about this is getting a little difficult, right? The whole economic system is built around the gods. If you wanted to go to the bank, you had to go inside the temple of Artemis. So everything that you would do to function in life is all built around these gods that you reject. And in Rome, the only legal religion was worshiping of the Roman gods, except Judaism had been grandfathered So if you were a Jew, you were okay. Now, where does Christianity fit with Judaism?
Part of who we are. It's part of who we are. It's our roots.
Yes, so the Christianity originated within Judaism, right? And so, because Jesus was a Jew, right? All the Old Testament prophecies talk about the Messiah. It's all Judaism. And so initially Christianity, by virtue of being part of Judaism, was accepted within Rome. But we are getting to the point where now the Jews are a little ticked off at the Christians. They don't accept Jesus, and so now it's convenient for the Jews to go, Caesar, see them, see those Christians? They're not part of us. And that makes Christianity illegal. Okay? So that's what's going on. And so as we open Revelation in chapter 1, anybody know where John is? Yeah, he's on the island of Patmos. And this week you can look, I put a map in your book. Patmos is a little teeny tiny island in the Mediterranean, and he's been banished there as a Christian, probably for proclaiming the gospel. Some people think it's because he ran into trouble with the authorities. They wanted him to acknowledge Caesar as Lord, and he declined to do that. And so he's been banished there. And we always, in the movies, we always see this thing about John. It's just John on this rocky island, and he's all alone. But actually, it wasn't. There's an army garrison there. There's a big gymnasium there for the military. There's a big temple to one of the gods there. But he's been banished there, just a little island in the middle of the Mediterranean. Not in the middle. You'll see on the map. It's close to Ephesus. And who is John writing to? John to the 7 churches in Asia. Now, Asia is, when we think of Asia today, we think of like China, right? This is not that. This is what we would call Asia Minor, or Turkey today. And these are not the only 7 churches that are in the Roman province of Asia, but they do happen to be 7 churches that are on a major trade route. And so if this message goes to these 7 churches, by virtue of their location on the trade route, the message is going to travel to the other churches. And interestingly, each one of these churches, maybe it was chosen because they were on a trade route, maybe they were also chosen because these are major cities of worship for other gods. Some of them are also very heavy into worship of the emperor. So you can imagine if you're one of these churches, so you live in this Roman culture, you live with emperor worship, you're having a hard time. If you wanna work, you have to be in a guild that worships a certain god. And if you're a Christian, you are now being forced almost to compromise with the culture, right? So it's like you just have to make your choice. You're gonna give in and kind of start tolerating worship of other gods or not. And so if you're a Christian who wants to get ahead financially, you got to compromise. And some of the Christians may have been just getting so worn down that they just flat out give in to the culture. So the church is becoming spiritually worn down. And in the next few weeks, as we go over these letters to the churches, it'll be interesting to see what Jesus has to say to some of them. Now, those who didn't compromise, they were in risk of being brought in front of the authorities, as I think I already said, and being told you have to swear allegiance to Caesar. And if you don't, you may get thrown in prison. Interestingly, a couple of these churches were founded by the Apostle Paul. That would have been in like the 40s and to 60s. So this is now like 30, 50 years later, and the churches are starting to struggle. So how are we today, in the year 2026, do we share some common things with these churches that John is going to be writing to? Is that?
We are lukewarm.
We're lukewarm.
There can be false teachers.
False teachers? Yeah, there's false, yeah.
Giving into like societal norms, like, oh yeah, Jesus doesn't hate this.
Okay, giving into the norms of society. Because you know, if you say certain things, or this is what truth is, how quickly you can get piled on, right? Especially on social media, you say something like that. Anybody ever been at work where your Christian position was made it very difficult? You know, you're asked to do something or support something that you can't support. So, and we live in this culture, right, that is steeped in immorality and worship of things besides the Lord. And at some point, it's just easy to just give in, right? At least to say, well, I'm better. I'm not entirely like the society. I'm better than the society, but not like Jesus asked me to be. So anyway. So, in the first few verses, what does John say his purpose for writing is? If you're just like the first 3 verses in Revelation, I'm looking for it. Let's see. I'll just read it. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the things which must soon take place. And then he goes, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, those who hear, those who keep what is written in it. So John, he's writing partly because Jesus told him to. But Jesus has this message because he wants his church to know what is coming and how they're to think and live in light of that. And he's going to be reassuring them that even though life is going to be hard, that Jesus is coming, and that there is a way that Jesus requires his people to live while they wait for him to come again. So you can see this is right up our alley, right? Because we are right there. We're waiting, saying like, when is Jesus going to come? I don't know. But the same message that Jesus gave these churches about how to live until Jesus comes still applies to us, because we're still in the until Jesus comes. Now, so here's the question. This is an easy question. Where do we find Revelation in the Bible? The very back end of the Bible. And interestingly, so Revelation is at the back end, and what's at the front end? Genesis. And so it's put this way because Genesis is the beginning, and Revelation is like the end, right? And so all these things that come into play in Genesis, and all these storylines that continue through the Bible, they all get tied up in Revelation. And so we're going to see sin enters the world in Genesis, and it destroys our relationship with God. And by the time we get into Revelation, we see sin is dealt with, our relationship with God is restored. Not just like today, we could say our relationship with God has been restored. But in Revelation at the end, it's going to be like God intended it to be. In our experience. And it's going to be God and man living together, not just in this little garden like we had in the book of Genesis, but in this fully restored, bigger and better new heaven and new earth. So that's another reason why Revelation is going to continue looking back to the Bible and pulling all these references. So out of all these themes that are coming, let me give you just a few themes that we're going to see a lot in the book of Revelation. First theme is, you can't miss it, is Jesus Christ. And who Jesus is. The book has a very high view of who Jesus is. He is the exalted Christ. He is the conquering king who is returning, defeating all his foes, getting rid of Satan, getting rid of demons, everything. So that's the first theme. The second one is God, as in God the Father. And we're going to see that God is completely sovereign always reigning on his throne. And you may have learned that God is triune. There's three persons to God. There's the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. We're going to see a lot of Jesus Christ the Son. We're going to see a lot of the Father. The Spirit is kind of the quiet one in Revelation. He's there, and you'll meet him this week. He's the one that empowers the visions. We'll see the Spirit before God's throne. But the Father and the Son are the major players in Revelation. And then another theme is salvation. And we're going to see a lot of Jesus as the Lamb of God that was slain for the sins of the world. And even as we get into the gory part of Revelation where there's all these judgments going on, occasionally we're going to stop in the middle of the judgments and go, time out, and now we're going to talk about how the saints are going to be protected in the midst of all this that's going on. So everything is around not just salvation of the saints, but protection of the saints as well. So let's see. Okay, number 4, divine judgment. We're going to see Jesus comes back second time as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and he is going to wage war on Satan and everybody who opposes him and judge them and conquer them. And the point is that no matter how things look now, that justice will be served. And we're going to see part of God's judgment on unbelievers, but by the time we get done reading Revelation, we're going to go, I understand why God is just to judge them that way. So divine judgment is one of the themes. And then faithfulness. I said at the beginning, Jesus is calling, it's a prophecy, so Jesus is calling his church to be faithful. And we will see this coming week, Jesus is held out as the supremely faithful one, and that we are faithful as we follow Jesus' example, bearing witness like Jesus did, even to the point of death. And that the idea that we conquer Satan through our faithfulness and our testimony to Jesus. Next thing, worship. You guys, there's so much worship in this book. Things happen and like all of a sudden, heaven starts worshiping. And then something else happens and heaven starts worshiping again. Because we're seeing again, right? We're seeing the spiritual side of things. So we're going to see the angels worshiping. We're going to see all of creation worshiping. There's going to be 24 elders around the throne. They fall down and worship. People worship. There's a flip side of it. There's a bunch of people who worship the beast, the satanic thing. So there's worship of God, and then there's worship of the other side as well. And then the last one I'll just highlight is this new creation, that the book ends with a new heaven and a new earth in the heavenly Jerusalem. And in the new creation, there's no temple. It's just God and the Lamb are the temple is just one big place where God and man are together, and all vestiges of sin and death are gone, and we experience complete and total fellowship with God. So those are the themes. Now, Paula, we're getting ready for you. Let me take this and keep going. I gave you guys, most of you have them, some of you may not, a colorful thing like this. And this is my experience in Revelation. I find it easy to get lost in Revelation. There's a lot of stuff that's happening, and I just went crazy trying to keep track. And let's see if this is going to work. And so I made a little sheet for you. And first of all, I'll tell you, do not try to memorize the sheet. You will lose your mind. I didn't memorize it. But I want to explain to you how to find your place in Revelation. So this is just a reference tool for you. First of all, I said Revelation is an epistle. And so if you look at this, the yellow part, I'm going to fall off the platform. Here's the introduction to the letter. Here's the body of the letter. And over there in chapter 22 is the end of the letter. So that's easy. It's a letter, right? Within the body of the letter, there are 4 visions, these white boxes. And so those are your 4 visions. And we will try to make it abundantly clear where we are, which vision we're in. So and each vision is in a different place. And it has a different focus. So in vision 1, John is on the island of Patmos. And first John is going to get commissioned. And then this vision is all about Jesus' 7 letters to the churches. Easy, right? Vision 2, John is up in heaven, in the heavenly throne room. And there's all sorts of stuff that goes on. But this entire vision, number 2, has to do with this war between good and evil. That's it. The war between good and evil. And these little red X's here are the end of the age, when Jesus comes back. So you get the idea. Jesus comes back, Jesus comes back, Jesus comes back, Jesus comes back. So in other words, if you're thinking Revelation is one chronological story from chapter 1 to chapter 22, you're going to be totally lost. We're going to go from today to Jesus comes back. Then we're going to do the same thing again, from today till Jesus comes back. But we're doing it with a different focus. Then we're going to take another focus from today to when Jesus comes back. Then we'll take another focus from today when Jesus comes back. So it's kind of like Groundhog Day. Okay? So that's your vision number 2. The struggle between good and evil, the prosecution of the war. Vision number 3, try not to fall over here, John is now in the earthly wilderness. And now it's all about the final judgment. Today, Jesus comes back. This is all the judgment stuff. And then vision 4, he's on a high mountain and he gets to see the new heavens and the new earth. So anyway, I hope this helps you. If you're thinking like, didn't I already see Jesus? Well, first of all, you're not going to see Jesus come back. We'll get here and you'll see there's a phrase that gets used to signal this is the end. You're going to see this phrase happen over and over and over again. And you may feel like, I think I read this kind of thing before. And the answer will be, you're right. Because we went from today till the end of the age. Okay? So that is your summary sheet. Use it to keep your place. Yeah, Whitney. Zoom is the question, why did he write it this way? And prophecy a lot of times is written that way. That's one of those genre things. I'm trying to think if Zechariah did it. Zechariah had the 8 visions that took us to the end. And I don't remember at the end, he kind of dealt with the same. But like the book of Isaiah, I've never taught Isaiah, but Isaiah does this big time. And I think that's one of the things that makes it difficult to teach is like, how many times do we cover the same topic? So, and I think, yeah, Patty.
John.
Huh?
How old is John?
Well, if it's 95, and I don't know how old he was when Jesus was around, but if you say, if he was born right, if he's roughly the same age as Jesus, so he would have been like 95.
Yeah, okay.
Right? He's an old guy. Yeah. Anything else? So it's just kind of an overview. Next week we'll start digging into it. Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is a lot. Chapter 1 we meet Jesus, and that kind of sets a foundation. And then right after that we'll start working on the letters to the churches. And I adore the letters to the churches. They're really good. So anyway, so that's all I got. I'm going to be quiet and let you guys go to your groups.